Hello, Bryn Terfel. Thank you very much for answering our questions and offering your precious time for the members of Opera Online. You're one of the top stars in the world, and Falstaff is definitely one of your most emblematic roles. Since when are you singing Falstaff, and when did you sing this role for the first time?
Well, first of all, I have, of course, boots to fill, because there was a very famous Welshman called Sir Geraint Evans, who was synonymous with the role of Sir John Falstaff. And he really was my first introduction to this role. He also rang Sir George Solti to listen to me, and was instrumental in maybe opening doors, which was very important for a young singer who was just out of college, very naive and not really trusting and knowledgeable within the profession. And therefore people like this became such an important, integral part in one's development in opera. And I sang the first monologue in a memorial service for Sir Geraint Evans, and conducted by Sir George Solti. So that was the introduction that I wanted. And I sang Falstaff at a very young age in Australia in the early 2000s, purely because I wanted to conquer the role vocally. I'm still delving into the characterization and never feel at the end of a performance that I have given the correct nuances and the intellectual part of Falstaff, because he is as canny as an Irishman, this character. Of course, he's an aristocrat, and you have to have this war of the social climate within the piece. So Falstaff for me is one of the most amazing roles to portray on the stage and to sing. But to sing it here in La Scala, Milan, at such a junction of celebration, not only for Verdi, but also for Wagner and for Benjamin Britten, it is truly an immense honor for the son of a farmer from North Wales to be singing on this amazing stage in La Scala in Milan. And just to think that around the corner, the octogenarian Giuseppe Verdi would have been sat in his hotel, giggling away, reading this amazing libretto that Voito gave him of snippets from Shakespearean plays, so wonderfully woven, and then of course the cloak of Verdi's music, giving it its final colors. Absolutely tremendous.
So are you it sounds that you're identifying yourself completely into this character, don't you?
Well, Falstaff, of course, there's the war of wars, there's this hunt, there's food, there's wine, and there's these people that are around him who are maybe below his social standing. These simple people, ogni sorta di gente dozzinale, he says towards the end of the opera. They make fun of him, but his wit is the one that gives them their credibility. You know, think of that first scene. He is in his big bed with all this food around him. His two servants, Pistola, Bardolfo, they stink, they're ugly, their clothes are terrible, and the old knight has fallen on bad times. So it sets a scene beautifully. And then of course, the music is very different to what people were used to hear from Verdi himself. And to finish his wonderful writing career with a comedy was probably very apt, even considering that Rossini had said, you will never write a comic opera. And to do it here in La Scala in Milano, thank goodness that Nabucco was a success, that he was given much more authority within writing operas. It's just a wonderful opera to be a part of. It's very collegial. People have fun. We laugh on the stage, and it's everybody trying to achieve something.
Do you think that that Verdi wanted to write a comedy, not only at the end of his life, because with this very tragic experience we had with Giorno di Regno, which was one day, one single performance, and a terrible moment when he lost his wife and her children and his children, and he needed to write a comedy, and it was definitely the worst moment to write a comedy. And then 50 years later, he started with Falstaff. Was this something you think in his mind, to do something, come back to something, to do it right?
Well, I think he was, of course, writing on Shakespearean texts. Macbeth and Othello had previously been a part of his wonderful repertoire. Who would think that if Antony and Cleopatra and King Lear would also have been in his career, and those 5 Shakespearean operas would have been such an immense undertaking for any opera house. But sadly, that in essence didn't happen. But we have 3 wonderful operas written with Shakespearean texts, and it's just an amazing achievement for anybody to sing the role of Falstaff, I think, when you have all these added qualities like costumes and makeup and wigs and all the things that are around you are hurdles. When I finish that first scene, I have to give myself always a pat on the back to think, did I perform that to the best of my ability? And that's what Verdi does for you. You cannot rest on your laurels. You have to be on the balls of your feet with everything. Yes, it's like this wonderful character in the middle of this piece, but these great people around him. It's like a painting, that everybody has a very specific role to play. And as Sir George Solti always said, there's never a small part or a small role in opera. Everybody has an important place with that key of unlocking that lock. It's very important.
Mm-hmm. What would it be for you, would this, for instance, your first scene, is this the key scene of the opera? Or does this define the personality of Falstaff in a way?
I think for me, there are a couple of moments where he sings Va vecchio John per la tua via. I think first of all he sings it after he knows he's got the girl. After Fontana, which of course is Ford in essence. I think Falstaff shows him what being a true gentleman is like when he comes back dressed up, ready for the hunt. And to visit Alice at the time where Ford is away, dalle 2 alle 3. I think when he sings that, of course, he knows he's got the girl. But then, of course, after he's been thrown in the Thames, the beginning of the last act is just this wonderful monologue of melancholy. His waning powers are leaving him. Virility is gone. And yet that little glass of warm wine brings this character back to life again. And yes, the page of the Duke of Norfolk has a spring in his step once more. And in this production, I have to tell you that I have had one of the most terrific experiences of being alone on the stage with a solitary horse and actually talking to this horse and seeing his reactions You know, people say always, never work with children and animals. But it's been a revelation for me to actually see this quiet moment of Falstaff with his one friend in the world, which is an animal that he converses with. And then, of course, the taverniere comes in with his request for the wine. But for me, that was an immense pleasure, just to feel that the audience even were shut off. I wasn't looking at the conductor, I wasn't hearing the orchestra. It was just me and him. That was just a real, like an eureka moment for me in my career. 47 years old, on the stage of La Scala Milan, with a horse.
With a horse. Did you talk this scene over with Robert Carson? Because this seems to be something totally written for you. In fact, you had a good relationship with him, I think, about this.
Well, that's a good question, because unfortunately, things happen in your calendar or your diary, the way that your agent has worked out specific things during the year. Unfortunately, I was in Zurich performing Der Fliegende Holländer, and Ambrogio Maestri was singing Falstaff here for the first 6 performances. And then a total honor for me to be given 3 performances here at La Scala, which was added that Ambrogio sadly was sick for one of the evenings, so I got an extra performance. So all in all, I'm doing 4. So I didn't see Robert Carson at all. And I had maybe 2 days of rehearsals. But when you're given 2 days and the assistant is there telling you what happens in the production, if things are explained to me, I don't know, you know, remember I'm a farmer's son from North Wales. Things have to work in this head of mine, that if a movement makes sense, I remember it. And if it doesn't make sense, I forget it, always. But in this production, every move I was given, I remembered immediately, which is maybe a sure sign that Carson had worked it out. He ticked all the boxes, crossed the T's and dotted the I's. But it didn't stop him from sending me a book of texts about certain things that were happening in the opera. For instance, one of the servants sprays a scent on the gloves. Mm-hmm. And I, in the first evening, as a bit of a joke, I like to try different things. I went like this so that they sprayed under my arms, so that Falstaff would have a nice smell going into Alice's house. But Carson immediately the next day said, don't do this, because Shakespeare's father was a glove maker. So young Will would have been spraying this himself. So it's a very serious point for him. And of course, I immediately took it on board. So it's little things like this create some wonderful moments on the stage. And you need it as a performer. It cannot be run-of-the-mill automatic pilot every night. Something has to happen on that stage so that you can have sparkle in people's eyes.
So you are improvising for each performance a little bit?
Yes, I think Falstaff is a piece that naturally things happen. And you've seen the production here. The costumes are beautiful. It is a real British feeling, of course, within the sets and the feeling on the stage, but also there's the style, the Italian style, which shows that the production has come from the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden to here, La Scala in Milan, and I think it'll make a journey over to New York as well in the Metropolitan Opera. So the life of a production, of course, is still alive, no matter what singer performs in it. And I think that we are, of course, very important within the chain of this production, but anyone who will sing in this production will enjoy it.
So that brings me to another question. I mean, that's why I said this is a production for you, because it was so natural. And we even could say that the opera was written for you, because this was just something, and everybody from the first moment, you captured everybody, and it was an extraordinary moment from the beginning to the end. So I think that this is not always the case. So what is your general opinion on opera staging?
I'm maybe of the opinion that the audience should really enjoy what they've spent their hard-earned cash to be entertained. So I think if you're an overweight knight that's fallen on bad times, it has to be something that's very entertaining. And the pictures on the stage has to carry you to a different sphere from your day-to-day routine. And it's not just for the audience, it's also for us. We have to enjoy walking into the opera house. I've always said that if I don't open the stage door with a smile on my face, I think it's time for me to go and play some golf and maybe take up fishing. But at the moment, thank you for saying that about the role of Falstaff, but I consider it a huge honor to be able to buy the score, learn the music, and perform it to the best of my ability. But I've always said, even in the beginning of the interview, that Falstaff is a role that I've never really nailed. I think always at the end I could have done this better. And that's not a bad thing. Because you cannot be too confident with any role that you sing on the stage, especially something like Falstaff, where the action moves forward so quickly, and it goes from one scene to the other. You saw that there are quick changes, for instance, that they are so quick. If one thing happens, like last night I couldn't put the last costume on.
That's why you were holding it like
this. Yes, because something happened with the socks, and then something happened with the shirt, and I had 4 ladies trying to dress me, and it was a chaos. And Falstaff came back on nude on the stage of La Scala in Milan. So all the chorus and cast were laughing and giggling. Even Daniel Harding, who was really under the weather and coughing and sneezing, but still being able to communicate with us. You know, that's another good question. You know, of course, when we are sick, we have to cancel. We stay at home but Daniel was really sick last night, and yet he still could give 100%. Daniel being Daniel Harding, of course, the conductor. Sure, yeah. And what's also really impressive is the La Scala opera orchestra here. Most of the players, I don't know if you noticed, all the orchestra were playing like this. And they know this music, and they want to see what's happening on the stage, why the audience were laughing.
So do you have also, let's say, some very negative experience with productions?
Of course, there are sometimes productions that you don't feel 100% committed to, but still you have to be very honorable within your contractual obligations to opera houses. I cannot come to a rehearsal period and think this is not working and leave. it's something that would be rather detrimental to you as a colleague. So we still have to, we have an obligation to our contracts. And you're singing in some of the most amazing operatic spaces in the world, from La Scala to Covent Garden to the Metropolitan Opera to the Garnier to the Bastille. There's historical elements of singers that have been on the stages and that conductors that have conducted orchestras. That is a part of this historical element when you walk into an opera house. And you cannot hide from that fact. But you have to have your own opinion.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes you have to keep it to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so just a very personal question. I mean, how, I mean, the way from a son of a farmer and to the top star, one of the top stars in the world at the La Scala, how did you fall into opera? That was, if I may say so.
Well, I left my square mile that I was very comfortable in Wales. I went to London to study for 6 years, and the development of the voice really showed the path of which way you were pointed in certain directions. And I think your career will start with concerts and oratorio, and then gradually as the voice develops, maybe the operatic world is something that you might take on. And I remember my first opera experience sitting in the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden. It was Otello with Placido Domingo, Justino Diaz, Katia Ricciarelli. I even remember all the cast. So Colin Davis was conducting. And that was the flame that ignited this candle. And this candle is still burning. It's a little bit like Falstaff, you know. He falls on bad times, but he goes back into that saddle so quickly. And I think it's the same thing for us. We go from each opera experience to different cities, to different cultures, to different colleagues. And that's what this bubbling effect keeps us alive. And it's such a privilege to be a part of. And I'm looking forward to the next experience. So it's like climbing different mountains. You know, I've had my Everest of singing Hans Sachs in Meistersinger from Nuremberg. But I want to find something, again, that will feather my own cap, most probably. And when I'm sitting on a boat fishing, I'll have those memories. Nobody can take them away from me. And to have worked with conductors and directors and wonderful colleagues is, of course, an achievement because it's hard work and dedication. That a young farmer's son from North Wales was capable of working hard, listening to people. I think that's one of the most important lessons I learned, because people are so wonderful with their suggestions and help along the way, from conductors like James Levine, John Elliott Gardner, Giulini, Riccardo Muti, Claudio Abbado. The list could be endless, but they're such an integral part of your journey, and treat it as something that is positive and not negative. So listening, I think, for any young singer, be quiet, listen, and take on board what people have to say to you. I think it's true in any profession, though.
Since lately, millions of people are watching opera via satellite transmission in cinemas. Many of them are not experts at all, and for many, it is the first time that they see an opera. how would you briefly resume the story of Falstaff for somebody who has never seen an opera before, like you would do it, for instance, for your children?
Well, Falstaff, I would certainly tell somebody who's never been to the opera to maybe choose this one as their very first journey. And you need a candle to be ignited within opera. And if there's an opera that has life and an amazing story, then Falstaff is the one. This big, fat, incredible knight that's fallen on hard times writes 2 letters to these women. And then, of course, he's written the same thing to each one. And the ladies of Windsor then have a grudge to bear against this old knight. But at the end, he has that last laugh. You know, they have made fun of him. He's been a cuckold. But everything in the world for him is that he's the one that makes them look very clever.
Well, thank you very much, Bryn Terfel. So it will be definitely a milestone in history of opera and the contemporary opera, this production of Falstaff here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Non so farlo svenevole e lusingarne usar frase fiorita, ma dirò tosto mio pensiero